Just a warning. Do you know what? Just give us all our name tags, and then when we leave with them.
No, the problem with that, the mics are
Does it tell? Oh,
the last time I have to get away.
He removed it. I don't matter.
Okay, 15 seconds. 10, 9.
Military. Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to yet another ActionSA press conference. My name is Lerato Ngobeni. I think it's evident that today marks exactly 1 year since the start of the 7th administration under the Government of National Unity. And so as ActionSA, after we gained our 6 parliamentary seats last year, we were quite happy with that achievement. And we made some promises to the South African people. One of the promises we made was that we were going to keep this government accountable, which is where we derive our data, which we have tracked. We guarantee you that that data is grounded in objectivity, sorry, that's all right. That's media, and that we launched at the formation of the GNU, and so to deliver the good, the bad, and the ugly of what our assessment has found, I have got my colleagues on both my left and right. We have designed our response in 6 thematic themes, six themes, that's the right language, which my colleagues will speak to. First up will be our national chairperson, Mr. Michael Beaumont, who will speak more to the GNU tracker and how we are using it. And then it will be followed by Ethel Trollip, who will be followed by a Member of Parliament, Ellen Beasley, and then who will be followed by Lemale Bukobe, followed by Dr. Jose Letlape, followed by myself, and finally Darylene James will conclude with her assessment. With that said, let me allow Mr. Michael Beaumont to take the floor.
Thank you very much indeed. I do enjoy press conferences because the one place my colleagues will call me Mr. And all the other occasions got much more colourful language for me. Greetings, colleagues, and to members of the media, thank you very much for being here. To my colleagues on this side of the table, to those following these proceedings from home, and from South Africans who, are looking to this press conference to talk a little bit about the future of their country, I greet you all. And I begin by reminding South Africans that in June last year, a year ago, we were invited to form part of this Government of National Unity. It was a process that we deliberated upon, and we ultimately decided not to, because we had a concern that 70% of the South African Parliament being in cabinet was going to be a dangerous precedent for South Africa. When you consider how important the role of an opposition is against government that on its best day is confused, and on its worst day far worse. And for that reason, we took on the role of a constructive opposition, and we have been playing that role ever since. It was the 14th of June, so on Saturday last week was the 1-year anniversary of the election of the president of our country, which he received the support of 8 or 9 other political parties to form a government of national unity. And this is why we regard it to be an important occasion for us to reflect back on the GNU 1 year later and to ask some important questions about how life has changed in South Africa in the course of that 1 year. It's important to remind South Africans of a very important event that has been completely forgotten about, and that was this much vaunted policy lekgotla announced by the President and his cabinet on the 11th and 12th of July last year. And the reason why it would be easy to forget about this important lekgotla is because nothing has arisen from it. South Africans were told that this was going to be the space in which the direction of our country was going to be set, the space in which they would be able to see the changes that would be coming in their future, and it came and went without so much as a whisper. And I think this was the first sign of ominous things to come, because in many ways that has been the pattern that is followed from a point of view of the question of change under this GNU. And that particular perspective has been around a lack of a coherent agenda. You will hear this from my colleagues a lot today, because what you really have is a government that is running in multiple directions all at once, and no direction enough. And this is why we have this concern regarding in which direction the GNU is taking South Africa. Because in many ways what you have is a GNU, the members of which spend a great deal of time telling us that we should be grateful for what they avoided by way of an extremist government in our country. And there's no question about that. But it is not enough for the next 5 years to tell South Africa that we should be appreciative of what we've avoided. South Africans expect the GNU must govern, and it must deliver services, and it must deliver the changes that were promised during the election campaign. And South Africans will not be able to live, breathe, and sleep under the protections of what we avoided. They need to benefit from the work and progress of government. And I think really, again, the concern emerges that what we are seeing is something which even as recently in the White House is telling the world around what we avoided. And the story around what it is delivering remains far more ambiguous. And this is why we launched the ActionSA GNU tracker last year in October. And even that was a remarkable thing that had to happen from the opposition space. And it had to happen from the opposition space because government, whose role it is to set the agenda and set the strategy of our country, has been silent on what our national KPIs are, what the strategy is that they're going to employ to achieve those KPIs, and what changes the South African people can expect arising from this GNU. So it was astonishing that ActionSA had to produce this tracker and had to define the national KPIs from the opposition benches of our country. But it was a task we underwent anyway, because we have to be able to measure whether government is making progress or not in real terms and not in the terms of PR. And in that regard, we developed a set of 6 KPIs around which the majority of the session will be focused with my colleagues in Parliament around ethical leadership and public service. So the question is government and is the cabinet changing its behaviors, becoming more frugal, more accountable, more honest and less corrupt? Economic growth and job creation is by far and away the most important, because no government can succeed in South Africa if those KPIs are moving in the wrong directions. Infrastructure, trade and transport for obvious reasons and driving economic growth in our country. Basic services, quality education and law and order. These are the 6 KPIs that we have set the government of national unity, and my colleagues in a moment will begin unpacking these different KPIs using a system of grading their performance, much along the way in which the Department of Basic Education grades performance. And yes, that does mean a pass is 30%. And I can tell you, colleagues, we have every intention of being fair, because there are cases where some things are happening that is good. We must call it out for what it is. We must celebrate the good in our country. And where credit must be given, my colleagues around this table will give that credit, because ultimately, even though we are not part of this government and even though we are part of the opposition, we are South Africans first and foremost before we are anything else. And we want our country to succeed. And we will call out and give credit where it is due. But at the same time, where they need to say some very harsh truths today, which there are some harsh truths that need to be said, ActionSA will be the point of the spear in that regard, because in many ways they are operating in a vacuum of opposition, a subject I'll get back to in a moment. So in considering the assessment of the GNU, it falls to me to undergo a fairly high level of assessment before my colleagues get into the details, and to talk about a few things that we have identified about this GNU. The first thing is the U needs to become U, because the idea of unity in this government has become a concept that is quite laughable. The parties in this small u government spend more time in court fighting one another than they do sitting around a table presenting their ideas for the country. And I think the one thing we must remark upon there is that unity has become a serious question in this government of national unity. The second thing is, it has undoubtedly been clear over time that this is a grand coalition between the DA and the ANC. As a matter of fact, if you pause to apply your mind to what it is that any other party has been contributing into this GNU, you do have to think quite hard, because all the space around which this GNU operates tends to revolve around those two parties. And I think particularly of concern to us is that there is no strategy, there is no policy, and there are no reforms. And let me just explain what I mean by that. It has to begin with strategy. It has to begin with a government that says this is the line of march, this is what our government must change about our country in the 5-year term. And there has been no resetting of that agenda at a national level from which all departments are meant to take their cue. There have been no policy changes, and there have been no reforms. And this is particularly concerning because anyone who understands the inner working of government will appreciate that while one would reasonably say a year later you cannot have expected the unemployment crisis to be solved, you could have expected that certain changes would have been announced and been implemented so that one could have an expectation about those reforms producing dividends in the months and years to come. That hasn't happened yet, and there's nothing even in the immediate that gives cause to believe that that is in our near future. And in the absence of that, what we have is an Instagram government, a government that is more inclined towards producing its successes in infographics and in TikToks and in tweets, rather than in substantive changes that are improving the lives of South Africans in a meaningful way. But all of these issues flow from one central problem, is that this government of national unity has been formed on the basis of a statement of intent and not a coalition agreement. Every learning that political parties have undertaken around coalition in this country and traveling to places where coalitions succeed, the first learning is you have a coalition agreement. And that agreement spells out what changes are going to arise under your government. And in the absence of that, what you really have is a GNU that has become an implementing agent for the ANC. And if you were to ask the average government official about what has changed in the last 18 months between then and now, they'll tell you it's just the bus driver that has really changed. And I think finally, from my point of view, the most fair departure point is against its own minimum program of priority, the statement of intent. And as I read these words to you, I would like you to please consider the question, how far are we away from these words in the statement of intent? The first, rapid, inclusive and sustainable economic growth, the promotion of fixed capital investment and industrialization, job creation, transformation, livelihood support, land reform, infrastructure development, structural reforms, transformational change, fiscal sustainability, and the sustainable use of our national resources and endowments. Number two, creating a more just society by tackling poverty, spatial inequalities, food security, and the high cost of living. Number three, stabilizing local government. There's a laugh for many South Africans. Effective cooperative governance, the assignment of appropriate responsibility to different spheres of government, and the review of the role of traditional leadership. 4, investing in people through education, skills development, and affordable healthcare. 5, building state capacity through a professional, merit-based, and corruption-free public service. Number 6, restructuring and improving state-owned entities to meet national development goals. This while we are busy contemplating a bailout for the post office. And strengthening law enforcement agencies to address crime, corruption, and gender-based violence. Now, colleagues, as I read those words, I understand that they are meant to be aspirational. But I'm sure you will agree with me as well that we are probably further away from the attainment of those goals today than we were a year ago. And the real concern is not only are we not experiencing improvements against these standards set in the statement of intent, but we are not seeing any implementation or any interventions by government now that would cause us to believe that in 6 to 12 months improvements would follow. And this is why we are concerned that the direction of this GNU very much remains set from the previous government before. And I think finally from my side, colleagues, it is appropriate for me to please pay tribute to our ActionSA members of Parliament. Very few of you will appreciate the vacuum that exists in the opposition space. But when I say that parties like the EFF and MK make for appalling opposition parties, I really do mean it. And these 6 members of parliament have stood up and they've had to operate like 60, and that's exactly what they've done. And they have been the proverbial David versus Goliath in every way. And I pay tribute to them now and recognize their extraordinary work, and particularly to their leader, Athol Trollip, the leadership you provide this team. We really appreciate the work that you have done for us. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
You can clap, you know. It feels cold in here. Very cold in here. So thank you, Michael. Thank you to the National Chair. As he said, we have graded this GNU from A to F. And let me just tell you what those mean, and then I will allow our caucus leader, Athol Trollip, to take the floor. A is excellent performance, outstanding delivery with no significant concerns. All objectives are met or exceeding with strong evidence of impact. B is for good performance, generally solid performance with minor concerns. Most objectives achieved through some improvements, though some improvements may be necessary. A C is for average performance. Some progress evident, but major issues remain. Inconsistent achievement of objectives and limited impact. A D is for poor performance. Significant underperformance with many objectives unmet. Serious concerns requiring urgent intervention. E is for very poor performance, minimal effort or result, negligible progress with critical shortcomings across key areas. And finally, an F, complete failure, no meaningful performance, objectives entirely unmet with a collapse in delivery and accountability. Jeez, that's hectic. To start off, we're going to have Athol Trollip, who will speak to ethical leadership and public service, followed by Alan Beasley, who will speak to economic growth that creates job opportunities. Malebu Kobe will come in and talk to enhanced infrastructure for efficient trade and transport. I will then come in and talk about quality of education for all. And then Dr. Khosi Letlape will speak to improve basic service delivery. And then finally, we will have Darylene James, who will speak to law and order that upholds a just society. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lerato, and thank you, Michael. I can understand why nobody clapped after the introduction, because when it comes to the statement of intent, I listened very carefully to what Michael Beaumont had to say, and I came to the conclusion that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. My topic is about leadership and ethical leadership in public service. Now, the very first thing that confounds me is that we have a new government with 70% support of Parliament, and not one of the new ministers and their plethora of deputy ministers have signed a performance agreement. Now, one thing I do know, you can't manage if you can't measure. So we have a president who's running a cabinet that cannot be measured, therefore he cannot manage it. And we know that management isn't his longest and strongest suit. So let me talk about leadership. Leadership is actually about being an example. And I must say there's sadly a dearth of example in leadership in this country. In fact, what we see every day is self-service and self-indulgence, which is not reflective of leadership. We heard one of the ministers in the GNU saying that expecting ministers to travel in anything but business class abroad would be tantamount to torture. Now, I wonder if that minister knows what kind of torturous conditions South Africans live in on their daily existence. In fact, being a member of the executive has seen more of a right than, a job of responsibility. We have seen excessive travel, extrapolated for the first year, close to 400 million rand of international travel. But what really bothers me, yes, it's expensive to fly abroad, and it's expensive to fly business class and first class. But what bothers me is that ministers and our deputy president can spend between 250,000 and 350,000 rand a night in a hotel. That is completely unacceptable, and it doesn't reflect ethical leadership at all. And then, of course, there's a lack of accountability in our cabinet. But, our cabinet grew from 66 members to 75, because the governing party, the ANC, refused to give up one seat and they wanted to accommodate more people. Just that increase cost South African taxpayers 1.5 billion rand a year. Just the increase in new cabinet seats and deputy minister seats. We've also seen a government that just refuses to accept accountability, the responsibility of accountability, and to respond to questions. The questions around travel, 2 ministers still have refused to account for their travel, which is a concern 1 year into government. Then we've seen a president who will not take action. I mean, who will forget the Minister of Higher Education, Minister Nkabane, refusing to answer the question on what credibility means. Refusing. We heard that the president called her to ask for her to account. We also heard the president calling for Minister Semelani to account, and that he was applying his mind to her allegations of corruption against her. We know that the president is considering the allegations of corruption against Minister Njavane, and we know that former Minister Gigaba and Mkhize are now serving as chairpersons in portfolio committees in Parliament. So what this is an indication that there is no war on corruption. There is no leadership as far as ethical behavior is concerned, because the president himself is implicated in Phala Phala. One of the most egregious examples of excessive travel is 10 million rand by the Minister of COCTA. Now, COCTA is about local government. Why would we travel anywhere in the world to fix our own local government travails? Going to countries like Germany or the United States or other first world countries is not going to give you any example of how to fix South African local government. And I venture that that is where the worst examples or lack of ethical government, accountability, and maladministration exist at local government level. So we have a president who will not act against his ministers. We have a president who will not act against his mayors or his councillors. We have a country that simply avoids accountability, and there is no leadership. I asked the Deputy Minister of COCTA a question in Parliament last week when there was an issue about the intervention of administrators into local governments that have failed. And I asked him to name one example of success. He couldn't. He couldn't name one example. Then when it comes to transparency and spending, the only way to gain the public trust is to be transparent. And taxpayers want to know where their money is going, and unemployed poor South Africans want to know why they can't get services, because they live a hand-to-mouth existence. Service delivery often goes underfunded, unspent, squandered, to no avail and no consequence. Nobody is held to account because the city of Joburg is falling apart. We've also come up with a cut cabinet perks bill because we have a cabinet that loves indulging themselves, and we want to reduce that. There's a constitutional amendment also to reduce the size of cabinet and to do away with deputy ministers. We believe you can run this country with 20 cabinet ministers and no deputy ministers. What we've seen, though, is that state capture and cadre deployment has wreaked devastation in our country. Today, or this week, marks the 3rd anniversary of the Zondo Commission. 3 years after the documents were given to the president, and there's been no high-profile prosecution. Instead, we've seen countries like the Seychelles move their credibility around corruption. They've improved from number 71 to number 72 out of 100. We have remained the same at 41. So we're the 41st worst country when it comes to fighting corruption. There's supposed to be a war against corruption in this country. Nobody's seen one shot fired. Nobody has seen one shot fired. And the blame must be laid at the door of the NPA and the National Director of Public Prosecutions, because we see them lose case after case, botching prosecutions. We've called for the suspension of the NDPP. We've called for an investigation into the National Prosecuting Authority. Criminals, especially connected criminals, know that they can get away with murder and that they will evade jail. And, you know, not only do the criminals employ Stalingrad tactics, so does the NPA, and allows criminals like Jacob Zuma, Zizi Kodwa, and the rest of the politically connected to stay out of jail. They just allow them to postpone one court date after another. We heard the NDPP say that her NPA has been infiltrated by crooked prosecutors. Now, we have a PRECA Act, an act that gives you power to act against corrupt, but we've got an NDPP who laments that her department has been infiltrated by corrupt people. We have also decided that the best way to deal with this is to call on a zero tolerance of corruption private members legislation, because we believe if the government won't do anything about it, we will lead the charge. There are also very serious gaps in enforcement, deterrence, corporate accountability, whistleblower protection, and lack of political will that allows corruption and crime to flourish in this country and become a profitable business. We attract criminals from the rest of Africa and the rest of the world to come and ply their trade in South Africa. Our President's response to all of these challenges is called a 700,000 Rand national dialogue. National dialogue. I wonder what will come of that. If the Zondo Commission's documents gather dust, what will happen of the dialogue? In conclusion, what is all the more concerning in regard to ethical leadership and public service is the GNU has not moved the needle much or at all, as my colleagues will talk to according to our GNU tracker. This section of governance, leadership and public service, scores an F. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. The reason why I entered politics 4 or 5 years ago was because of the plight of the unemployed. You know, it really breaks my heart, and I'm sure with most of you people, when you drive around, you see unemployed men sitting on the side of the road, sitting in the sun, sitting in the rain, desperate to find work. It really breaks one's heart just for them to get some wages to take home to give their family something. You hear the stories of the unemployed graduate who's gone through great sacrifices to get graduated. You know, it's heartbreaking. And Martin Luther King Jr. puts it so well when he describes unemployment as psychological murder, because it deprives a person of their hopes, it deprives a person of their dreams, and it actually takes away their purpose for living. It takes away their agency. It's soul destroying. And in South Africa, we have 8.3 million people unemployed. There's a further 3.5 million workers who have been discouraged, who've actually given up looking for work. So there's nearly 12 million South Africans that are unemployed. 12 million South Africans that are being psychologically murdered because of unemployment. And the sad reality is, under the GNU, it is getting worse. Unemployment is increasing. And as ActionSA, we use the metric expanded unemployment rate, which under the GNU has ticked up from 42.6% to 43.1%. And in the last quarter alone, 300,000 jobs were lost. That's nearly 5,000 jobs a day. Today, 5,000 people will lose their jobs. Tomorrow, 5,000 people will lose their jobs. When ArcelorMittal, there was talk about them closing down, there was a huge outcry, rightly so, because 3,500 people would lose their jobs. We're having an ArcelorMittal closing down every single day, and it's shocking. And the main reason for this is because of the stagnant economic growth. The only way we're going to address poverty, unemployment, and inequality is if we get economic growth of between 3 to 4%. And in terms of our metric, the GNU has hardly ticked up above 1% in this year. And the forecast is not looking much better. When the finance minister tabled budget 1.0, the economic growth forecast was 1.9. When he did budget 3.0, 2 months later, it was 1.4. And I sense if he did a budget 4.0, it'll be less than 1%. And if you actually look at the key sectors in our industry, manufacturing's falling off the cliff, construction's falling off the cliff, mining's falling off the cliff. You know, when Dean McPherson got part of the GNU, great fanfare, he said he's going to turn South Africa into a construction site. Well, I don't know if he's living in a different South Africa to me, because I certainly haven't seen a construction site. And fortunately, there's been some growth in agriculture, and it's not because of any GNU policies, it's just because of the resilience of our farmers. And the main reason for this lack of economic growth is there's been lack of bold, pragmatic reforms. And the GNU is bereft of ideas. We've got to say it as it is. They're bereft of ideas. They spend more time in legal battles than actually sitting around the table and saying, how can we get our economy going? In 1 year, not one economic policy has been put forward. Growth is stagnant and unemployment is worsening. Other metrics we measure in the economic sector is global competitiveness. We know we ranked 60th out of 67. It's not getting better. In fact, it's getting worse. It is so difficult to run a business in South Africa. You think we need jobs, we need economic growth. You think it'll make it easier to run a business, but the GNU is making it harder. In terms of debt, under the GNU, our interest servicing cost has increased. It's gone from 20 cents in every rand to 22 cents in every rand goes to pay interest. And that is over 40 billion extra a year we're paying to service our debt. And it's one of the greatest areas that's going to impact on the macro stability of our country going forward. In terms of some green shoots, inflation, we've got to take our hats off to the Reserve Bank. And I think the reason why the Reserve Bank has been able to address inflation is because of their independence. The GNU haven't been able to get their hands on the Reserve Bank, and I think that's why it has been positive. Another positive is a grey listing. It looks like we've come off the FATF list at the end of the year, and that is a positive. So in conclusion, when you look into the eyes of the unemployed, you see pain. The longer they're unemployed, the deeper the pain. And it's not just about a lack of job. It is a suffocating darkness that eats at one's humanity. Because of the 12 million people that are unemployed in our country and the fact that it's getting worse, the GNU must get the worst possible mark for economic growth that creates job opportunities. They get an F. It is a complete and dismal failure. I thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Well done.
Thanks, Alan. Short and sweet. Well, good morning, South Africans. I think the recent Youth Day celebrations that we had at the P20 Youth Parliament reflected so much about the unemployment that young people are facing, something that Alan has spoken about. And I think to address unemployment effectively, there should be capital investment into our infrastructure, which we haven't seen much, especially within the GNU. Rightfully so, Alan did say that when the minister came in, he came in with the promise of creating a construction site for South Africa. But in fact, what we are seeing is that since he has come in, there's been a loss, in fact, of 103,000 jobs in the construction industry. We might see this reflected, this construction site or the ideals of it be translated into Instagram posts, but on the everyday lives of South Africans, people are losing their jobs on a daily, and that is something that we as ActionSA are going to be measuring their performance against. Now, I'm going to be looking at infrastructure, particularly for efficient trade and transport. Efficient ports are critical for our trade, which directly impacts our economic growth. According to the World Bank Global Container Port Performance Index, it has rated us down in South Africa. It shows that we are not maximizing on our ports, and our coastal communities are also paying the price for this. We believe that our ports should at least be the highest ranking ones in the sub-Saharan region in Africa. However, the most recent index shows that Durban and Cape Town have in fact regressed in terms of their performance. Durban has went down from 369 to 398, while Cape Town has digressed from 362 to 405th, which is the worst port that is tracked in Africa. I mean, we are supposed to be leading in terms of ports on this continent, yet ports like Berbera in Somalia rank top 100, which is a missed opportunity that this GNU is not seeing into. Also looking at freight rail, there hasn't been sufficient investment into it, which is a missed opportunity. Large amounts of economic growth could come from that, especially in sectors like mining, agriculture and manufacturing. We believe as ActionSA that the daily freight rail payload benchmark should be 500,000 tons. However, we have seen that under the GNU, volumes have stagnated just under 450,000 tons, with declines continuing quarter after quarter. Transnet data also shows that rail freight volumes have fallen below from 2008 levels, while port container volumes have risen slightly over the past 14 years. It undermines economic growth and job creation, and also in this case road freight and public safety. We do, however, have green shots. We are constructive opposition. We're not here just to shoot them down. We have seen that there has been, an increase in Eskom's energy availability factor, which has, improved that we don't have a lot. This is why we're not seeing a lot of load shedding that is happening, which has also affected business confidence. A lot of young businesses that have been struggling under load shedding are able to operate much better. Although we welcome the reduction in load shedding from the previous years, Eskom's failure to meet its own internal 65% target and the continued high rate of breakdowns show that the GNU is far from delivering a stable, sustainable electricity supply. Also, one of the other green shoots that we have seen is in PRASA. I think on Thursday I went around one of the stations, the Metro Rail stations here in Cape Town, and we have seen that young people are actually utilizing PRASA to ensure that they're able to move much more cheaply, much more affordable in the economy. But what will also, sour this achievement is the 2.5 billion that was spent already on refurbishing the yellow fleet, which lay rotting in depots. Instead, this money could be used better with the new trains, or with the railway corridor recovery and station refurbishment. In recognition of the above, and with regard to infrastructure for efficient trade and transport, as ActionSA, we award the GNU a grade of D, as the evidence points to an overall poor performance. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I have to talk about improved basic service delivery. So I think mine is the easiest task, because as all of you know, there has been no improvement in that regard. So it's probably the easiest task. But one of the things that you use to measure basic service delivery is access to proper sanitation, which is a basic human right. And it's a cornerstone of public health and dignity. People might not understand that one of the things that has improved the health of the population is proper sanitation. Livelihoods have improved, lifespans have increased. How do we perform on sanitation in this country? The matrix is that everyone should have access to proper sanitation. So it's 100% achievement. I live in two provinces, Gauteng and Cape Town. And I can tell you that just here in Slovo Park, you go to the corner of Slovo Drive and Freedom Way, there's sewage leaking, and I can assure you right now that there's sewage leaking. You drive around Johannesburg, you have manholes that are lifted in the middle of the road, there's sewage leaking. So not only are we moving backwards in developed areas, we're also moving backwards in the townships. In a country where squatting seems to be a right, breaking the law seems to be a right of citizens, how are you going to have proper sanitation when you are allowing people to live anywhere they wish? And they would then be empowered by the judiciary about having rights. So you have this system where if you break the law, you jump the queue. You build a house in a riverbed, and suddenly you have to be prioritized in terms of housing, ahead of all the others that have been waiting for 2 generations. They've been waiting for 31 years in the queue. But in South Africa, it's fairly simple. Break the law, and you are elevated. And that is an irony. How can we have access to basic services when the modus operandi in this country is to reward lawlessness? People destroy our infrastructure. Transformers disappear. Rail lines disappear. And nothing gets done. When roads are being constructed, you have extortion mafia stopping construction. How can we have basic service delivery when just upholding the rule of law is not possible? Now, let's move into another area, health. I left the ANC because the president signed the NHI bill, which is a bogus deal. It's promises on something that's never going to be delivered. It's talking about health for all when you are in a separate health systems. Go into our health system. We went on an oversight visit to Rahima Musa Hospital, 140% occupancy. And we asked the officials, what's happening? They say 40% of the people they see are foreign nationals. Keep the system for legal citizens, you are at less than 100% occupancy. But nobody cares, because that's where the ordinary people go. And we cannot deliver on services. Now, it's untenable when people come with unfunded mandates. Repeatedly we ask in the House, how is the NHI going to be funded? Repeatedly you get told it's for Treasury and Finance to talk about that. So why are we talking about something that we know cannot be funded properly? Where you are bringing up another layer of apartheid health. You are creating a medical aid for the poor that you will not use for yourself, but that you will administer, and there'll be money to be made. Back to the issues of service delivery. I don't know if any of you remember when the president promised us a smart city. It's nowhere to be found. Why can't we make simple objectives of clean cities, not smart cities? There's waste everywhere. And when you have waste, it's a health hazard. Why don't we set ourselves a simple task of clean cities? It does not require foreign direct investment. It does not require loans from the IMF. It just requires us to do our civic duty to each other. There's no aim of that nature. Diseases are prevalent. We have children that are starving. We have childhood diseases that we cannot get on top of. I mean, I've lived in this country all my life. I've worked all my life, but suddenly, I'm going to be bankrupted by municipalities. Because I can't afford basic services. I've paid off my bond. I can't afford the tax that the city expects me to pay. Electricity has improved, but it's still not reliable. It's still not reliable. Not only is it not reliable, it's unaffordable. Now, when your input cost for energy is so high, how can you build an economy? How can you run your hospitals? How can you run transport? So when we talk about the need for basic services to improve, we're talking about basics. There is no intentionality to deliver or succeed. Otherwise, squatting would have been declared illegal. Otherwise, we wouldn't be naming areas of squalor after struggle heroes. It's time to stop talking and start delivering and monitoring performance. If we can't do that, there will be no service delivery. So, on service delivery, the mark is an F. And it's only an F because there is no age in our grading system. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. As Doc was speaking, I was about to crash in my own delivery of the grading that we've given for the delivery of quality education for all. Let me be upfront and tell you already, we've graded them an E for very poor performance. Now, it goes without saying that they've had 1 year to do this, but of course, that's the only green that I see in terms of the work that we've achieved or we've done as the portfolio committee measuring the outputs of basic education. Now, let me sound the first alarm in my view. The first alarm is the dropout crisis. I have named my assessment that South Africa's education system is a tragedy, because the real matric pass rate metric that our GNU performance tracker has tracked it at a percentage of learners who complete grade 12 relative to the cohort of initial initial students who get into the system at grade 10. But unlike what we have seen and what we have been told since the pass rate that we were told last year, this year that it has improved. In fact, it was the highest matric pass rate that we have seen since the dawn of democracy. What they won't tell you is that the real matric pass rate is not as shiny because those who've passed and those who started grade 10 has dropped. In 2023, the rate was 55.3%, and in 2024, contrary to what the minister told us at the beginning of this year, has fallen further. It is now 53.6%. This means that half of our children are not completing school, and this is a national crisis. It's very sad to hear people talk about the fact that Bantu education delivered a better education and better education outcomes than what this democratic government has delivered. This is a true tragedy. I can tell you from personal experience, when we talk about the fact that South Africa's children cannot read for meaning, I'm sad to tell you that a lot of them cannot read at all. And I have one in my own family. My own nephew is struggling in this particular way. The second alarm that I want to sound is the alarm of bucket toilets. Now, the minister has been going around all over South Africa, in Limpopo and everywhere, delivering these toilets that have some kind of improved pit latrine look that I have seen with air vents, etc., etc. There are a couple of things that we need to consider when we talk about this, because in some instances, people are saying you've got a water crisis in this country. We don't have access to water. And so when we come and deliver this infrastructure that ends up being a white elephant, you've got communities who have said, we don't want these new improved pit latrine looking things, because at the end of the day, we don't have access to water. And so, the pit latrine that they had seem to be working better than what we are currently delivering. And this is a serious, serious problem, and there's no excuses left in terms of our ability to deliver this. The minister spoke about the fact that this would be arrived at the end of March, but we've seen that 1 out of every 14 children in our schools, out of 14 schools, are still using bucket toilets. So this is a true crisis. The third crisis that I want to talk to is the crisis of NSFAS. With NSFAS, even those who do right still get the short end of the stick because it is chaotic there. One of the most disappointing outcomes of the dysfunction at NSFAS is the fact that you've got students who sit without being supported in the delivery of the monies that need to be paid for them to be able to access higher education. And this is a betrayal because some of them land up in unsavory circumstances where they fall to all of the social ills that we've all become all too accustomed to. And this includes things like prostitution, because some of them really can't go back home because none of them want to disappoint their parents. And so as ActionSA, we believe that NSFAS should be supporting at least 1 million students per year. but without basic accountability and leadership, it is failing spectacularly. The fourth crisis or the alarm that I want to sound on education is the issue of youth unemployment. Now, yesterday we saw millions of young people, including ourselves, who still consider ourselves young, by the way, marked Youth Day. But you know, I was listening to some of the media reports. A lot of them were not celebrating at all, except to celebrate the youth of '76. This is a great tragedy because you know we need to be seeing our own young people now celebrating. But the painful reminder of how little has changed since the dawn of democracy also spells out the fact that young people not in employment, education, and training has risen to 45.1%. This is nearly half of our youth who are locked out of opportunity, without work, without support, and without hope. Now, I've seen the face of hope as I traverse the country, and the face of hope of hopelessness is a true tragedy for this government of national unity. And then the fifth alarm, and maybe the last that I want to highlight, is this idea that you know we are losing a generation. This is a true tragedy. When even those who do everything right cannot find work, it is a clear sign of systemic failure. Meanwhile, sector education and training, the SETAs, I don't even want to go into the SETAs. You've seen the disaster that is happening in terms of the cadre deployment that is happening at the SETAs, who are supposed to be actually providing relevant work-ready skills, have become synonymous with political meddling, inflated executive salaries, and underperformance. And so, you know, I wish that I could have told you better in terms of our education system, but our education system, colleagues, is a true tragedy because, you know, the elusive education is the weapon that you can use to change the world statement by the founding president of our democracy, Dr. Nelson Mandela, is ever elusive. And so without a better educated youth, you cannot deliver a citizenry that is engaged, that is sharp, that is going to be able to function in the building of a future and prosperous South Africa. So unfortunately, I wish that I could have come with better news, but I think that the system is definitely deserving of that E. Thank you very much.
Good morning to the media, and good morning to all South Africans listening. Now, my task here today is to speak on law and order. Law and order that upholds a just society. And I was trying to think, what does a just society mean, Ethel? A just society means the right to life and the right to freedom of movement, which we as South Africans has been robbed of. Our communities are going through the most, and we continue to see the candid approach from this GNU. We continue to hear now, lately, the new buzzword in the media is the national dialogue. I call that national dialogue another poppy show, as what we would call it in our community, when something is all about the show and no action. For how many times over the past 30 years do we want to have national dialogues that's going to probably cost this country millions, when in Kempton Park this morning there isn't even a cover for a docket? We cannot spare 10 Rand for a docket cover. When at most of our police stations in the Western Cape that has been ranking top 10, you'd swear it's the musical charts, ranking top 10 for the past 10 years, the Western Cape and Gauteng police stations, for a high murder rate, contact crimes. What are we doing about that? You know, when we started off and we briefed this morning, we were saying, let us say something good. Let's recognize efforts. You know, we cannot just come here and sound, you know, all dull and gloomy. We must notice and highlight the good efforts that government has done. I've been trying to dig really deep. Really, I have. And because I've been on the ground, because I visited over several police stations in the past year, I cannot find anything good about 30 detectives having to sit in one office sharing 4 cell phones. I cannot find anything good about one vehicle having to serve a community where bodies are being carried out on a daily basis. I cannot find anything good and positive when I just heard my colleagues speaking about a high school dropout rate, and we are led and guided by legislation that is laying dormant, Act 35 of 2008, the Children's Act, that clearly identifies and highlights the importance of social crime prevention, and for SAPS to ensure that that child that's begging on the street corner, Lerato, that has dropped out of school, that they are meant to actually take that child in, and those parents can be held accountable. Maar ons gee nie om, because if we can keep them uneducated, we can continue being corrupt. Year in and year out, we speak about the high corruption levels within SAPS. We speak about the failures at the CSC within SAPS, up until today, still telling people that you have to wait 24 hours to open up a case. Still telling our family members that they need to go back to find a photo of a missing 11-year-old child that is in urgent need of care and protection. The month of marked where we commemorated Child Protection Week. No one was being protected. I have a list this morning. Just in the month of May, 11-year-old Jaden Lee Meek, who was gravely failed by SAPS. We have the young, I wrote it down, Chanel Plaik is 14 years old. Olarato, repeat offenders, they were arrested, but because of the failures of this justice system, we enabled that crime. Who is keeping this government to account? Who is enabling the crimes within our communities? Althea Smith, 26. The other day you mentioned Lerato, 14-year-old Likona. This is just for the month of May. We continue to read out stats such as 5,727 lives lost, 64 lives per day. I can this morning give you names of lives that was lost in my community in Eldorado Park over the weekend. 3 children below the age of 18 shot and killed brutally. It's a daily occurrence in all our communities. And yet, we are now going to hear with the national dialogue, the poppy show that's about to commence, we are about to embark on. We are about to put together a task team. We've been hearing that for far too long. For how much longer are we meant to be talking and expressing ourselves and being frustrated? For how much longer do you want to see the faces of rape victims coming to tell their grave stories of how they've been violated, just so that we can all sit back and say it and do absolutely nothing? Another talk shop for South Africans with little resources to our police stations. Our communities are going through the most. A just South Africa remains a dream for many children, for many women and children. We cannot even move. We speak about the right to movement in our constitution. Who do we hold to account for violating that which our government has promised us, safety? I want to say, I can go on about this because I'm very passionate about what is unfolding in our communities, and especially with the attack, the onslaught on our women and children. And it is something that I cannot speak candidly about because it's a national crisis. And having said all of that, in recognition of the above, and with regard to ensuring law and order that upholds this so-called just society that we are all striving towards, ActionSA awards this GNU a grade F, julle drape, as the evidence points to an overall poor performance. I thank you.
Colleagues, I think that is a rather bleak ending to an evaluation that we really did quite objectively. We told you about the GNU tracker and how we established that tracking mechanism. We've now reported on it. So first of all, let me just say thank you very much to Michael Beaumont for being here, and also our President Herman Mashaba for allowing us to be ActionSA members of Parliament in Parliament and to do what we do. I also want to thank our support staff for capacitating the work that we do. But I wonder if the public and the media would have noticed, listening to this testimony from my colleagues, how badly this government's actually doing. We didn't come here just to criticize. We've committed ourselves to be a constructive opposition. But when you do honest assessment and you listen to the first-hand experience of these members of Parliament, our government really hasn't done well. We have shown through conditional support for the fiscal framework, on condition that the VAT was taken away, that we do support the government. We want this government to succeed. We want South Africa to succeed. In fact, we were being more cooperative than GNU partners were in passing our budget. We make an undertaking that when the budget is finally debated on in July, that we will consider each line item by line item, and we will support where we can and we will oppose where we have to. However, I want to reinstate what we've just done here today. Today is an evaluation of the GNU, not of the ANC, not of the largest party in government. The days of the ANC being regarded as the government are over. We are evaluating a GNU coalition. We've evaluated them on their performance, on the performance of the economy, on crime, on education, on healthcare, on service delivery and infrastructure. We've just done that. Around financial management, around care, it's been an objective assessment. We will hold this government to account. We will continue to ask tough questions and report to you, the media and the public, on the responses we get to those questions. But governance is also about a perception. Our performance in the White House by the delegation that was sent there to the United States was an embarrassment. A journalist in this country described it to the casual observer: South Africa has been exposed as a country, a violent country, at war with itself. When you listen to Dereline talk about lived realities in South Africa, we realize we live in a crime-infested country. We also live in a country where politicians get away with murder, literally, and still embrace corruption with no accountability. The unemployment figures, as Alan Beasley spoke about, are a crisis that nobody's prepared to do anything material about. Because if they were, the numbers wouldn't be going up, they would be coming down. But we see them going up. This is a regrettable reflection on the whole GNU. And parties in the GNU that want to behave like opposition parties don't have the right. They are all part of the GNU, and they must all take responsibility for this abject assessment of their performance over the past year. My last words on today is that when I listen to my colleague Dr. Letlape saying that if you break the law, you get illicit economy grows, and our economy can't grow because of that, and an abject GNU government. Gangsters, extortionists, murderers, kidnappers, cash heist criminals, they do as they please in this country. If a train derails, it gets looted in front of the police, on television cameras. Nobody is held to account. It's time for action, and that is why ActionSA has called this press conference, to tell the GNU that they are not performing, because all the indications are we have a government that has failed South Africa despite all the hype. Nearly 7 years ago, there was Ramaphoria in this country, flattered only to deceive. A year ago, there was GNU with much hype. Unfortunately, they have failed. And if you look at the results, no A's, no B's, no C's, only D, E, and F. And as Doc said, if there was an H, he would have given an H. And I'm afraid that concludes our press conference on a very somber note. But we're open to take questions. To any member you'd like to ask, just give us your name and pose the question to the member that you'd like to ask a question of. Thanks very much.
Yeah,
Lerato.
when I come in, okay, facilitate. Yeah, okay. Well, let me come back then. Sorry. As Darylin said to an official last week, I see you have demoted yourself. I thought that my caucus leader was going to facilitate Q&A, but I'm here to do that. Yeah, I'll take the first round. Did we give you all the goods? Okay. We'll have Haley and then. Okay, go ahead. Maybe it'll. Maybe is another hand at the back? Okay, great. Thank you.
Morning, thank you. Lindsay Dentlinger, Eyewitness News. 3 months ago, your party helped the ANC to get the fiscal framework over the line, the former fiscal framework. And there was a lot of talk at the time that there might be some kind of more formal working relationship that you might establish with the ANC going into the future. Given this report card, are we to assume that all talks are off and you continue to be the opposition that you are? And while you are busy scoring, you have said that with your 6 seats you've had to step into the breach of what you view as a dismal opposition in Parliament. Can you just expound on why you feel that the opposition currently, they probably feel differently, that they've not been effective? Thank you.
Who would you like to answer your question?
I'm going to answer it.
Anyone? Okay. CL will do it. Go ahead.
As you see, on the national dialogue, describing as a
Copy show.
yes, a show, and as the two of you said, you don't think come out of it after the Zondo Commission support has been gathering dust without any consequences, especially of the high-profile people that were implicated. As ActionSA, this national dialogue, besides being a hobby dance, what is it would you expect the outcome there to be?
Okay. Is there any other question? All right. I think the caucus leader can take both questions. Thank you.
Okay, let me start with the last one. We know that the price tag is now set at around 700 million rand. We know that it'll grow to over R1 billion. It happens. That's what happens with these kind of things. We will participate in the national dialogue. Make no mistake, we will participate. But we believe that the real national dialogue took place last year in 2024, a year ago in the elections. We know that the next real national dialogue is going to take place in 2026 when it comes to the local government elections. That's when South Africans, hulle maak hulle stem dik. That's when they use their voices. And we know that more than half of the South African population eligible to vote didn't vote in the last election. Now that's an extraordinary number, but in a country like ours, it's understandable because of our past, that people have been hanging on, voting for a government that they believed was going to finally do what they promised to do, but haven't done it. So in the last election, we saw massive stay away. We believe that that's going to turn around. But as I said, what do we expect from the national dialogue? Well, if you look at our track record, our government's track record on doing things about outcomes like the Zondo Commission, we expect very little. Cyril Ramaphosa is in the twilight of his presidency. He's hardly going to do anything seismic. He hasn't done anything seismic, actually, since he was the deputy president of this country, sitting next to Jacob Zuma. After Zuma, he described South Africa's, Zuma's governance as 9 wasted years. His has been 7 wasted years. By the time he comes to the end of his tenure, it would be 9 more wasted years. So we don't expect him to act, but we will make a contribution. We have been engaging with people, unemployed people, homeless people, graduates that aren't access jobs. We've been interviewing them on a daily basis, and we'll continue to do that until the national dialogue is convened. We will speak on their behalf. We're not going to make up stories. We're not going to tell beautiful stories about a poor governor. We're going to tell, in the dialogue, we're going to speak for those people who speak to us. Yes, we did support the fiscal framework, and it was conditional, and people opposed that because they said you can't have conditional support. Well, we believe that our conditional support tactic worked because the minister made a commitment to do away with VAT. When the DA and the EFF went to court on that matter, it was a hollow victory. It was a Pyrrhic victory because it had already been sorted. What then happened was there was an increase in the fuel levy, and the basket of VAT-free products was reduced. Now, the fuel levy was cushioned by a reduction in fuel prices, but we're seeing an increase in fuel prices looming with the Iran, Middle East, Israeli tensions. So that's going to come to bear, and it's going to hurt South Africans because we have government that cannot cooperate. Were there any talks about any commitment? Michael Beaumont made it quite clear. We made a conscious decision not to go into the government of national unity. We don't want to be in the government of national unity. We are perfectly placed between a hegemonic GNU and a big but hopeless opposition. The one thing the DA has shown is that they were good in opposition. I heard John Steenhuisen, Minister of Agriculture, last week saying he has learnt that government's more difficult than opposition. Wow, that's quite an observation. But they were good in opposition. MKP has shown to be really bad in opposition. They're poorly led. They are all over the show. The leadership keeps changing in that party. And many of their members are actually former people that were implicated in state capture. They're defending themselves rather than being an effective opposition. They defend themselves in portfolio committees on matters under serious discussion. The Road Accident Fund, for example, one of my members was threatened. He was threatened by an MKP member because he was ostensibly persecuting the CEO of the Road Accident Fund. Now, I've reported that to the Speaker. We're not going to be threatened by gangsters in this Parliament, and we're not going to be frightened by people who don't want to be held to account. We don't want to be part of the GNU. We made it quite clear to the ANC that were petitioning our support that we don't want any quid pro quos. We will support where we can, and we will oppose where we must. That is our lodestar, that is our commitment to South Africans, and that's what we will do for the rest of this term. 5 years of opposition, and we are an opposition. In fact, we are even mobilizing the other smaller parties that aren't in the GNU or the MKP. We're mobilizing support on seminal issues, some private members' legislation that we are determined to get pushed through. A Rule 119 intervention about broad-based black economic empowerment and unemployment. We're going to work with other political parties to be the opposition that South Africa so desperately needs. Thank you. I think I'll wrap it up. I'd like to thank Lerato for facilitating, and I want to commend my colleagues. Listening to you makes me confident that you speak for South Africans in your portfolios. Thank you very much, and thank you to the media for coming and giving us the opportunity to tell a story.